you know that you can trust the New Testament as being reliable? After all, it's a pretty big book. In fact, it's 27 books. Let me give you 3 quick tests about how historians judge any ancient book, and we'll see how the New Testament fares. The first one, we just ask the question, does it claim to be true? It's called the internal evidence test. When you look at the New Testament writers, it's remarkable about how many times they go out of their way to tell us that truth is important. So Luke, who's a medical doctor, begins his gospel by saying, "Many have undertaken to examine the events among us, but I have carefully recorded truth, and in passing on to you, Theophilus, essentially what I know to be true." 2 Peter 1:16, Peter says, "We're not following clever invented tales. We were eyewitnesses." And in 1 John, the author says, "What we have seen, what we have heard, what we have touched with our hands, we proclaim to you." So the biblical writers claim to be eyewitnesses. They claim to have carefully reported truth. And then what's amazing is, as we know from the apostles, they were willing to suffer and willing to die for their belief that this story was true. And they were eyewitnesses of the risen Jesus. That tells me that they really believed that it was true. Now, the second question is, you've heard of the telephone game, how word is passed from one person to the next over time. Well, what about the Bible that's been passed for 2,000 years? Well, scholars have what's called the bibliographical test, where we simply look at how many manuscripts do we have and how early are those manuscripts. The more manuscripts we have, the earlier they are, the better chance we have of reconstructing the original. Well, friends, for many ancient documents, manuscripts are 300 to 500, 1,000 years plus removed. For the New Testament, we have a portion of the Gospel of John at least within 40 or 50 years. The copies of the New Testament are way earlier than any other ancient books that people don't even question. But then the other question is, how many copies do we have? The more copies we have, the better chance of getting the original. Well, for a lot of ancient documents, we have 10, 12, 50, maybe a couple hundred. For the New Testament, we have over 23,000 handwritten copies. This gives us confidence when we compare the copies that we can reconstruct what was originally written down. Number 3, what we call the external evidence test. Is there evidence outside of the book that supports the internal claims? And this is where archaeology and ancient writings come in. You know, there's writings outside the Bible that confirm that Jesus claimed to be God, at least that Christians believed that he was God. There's writings that confirm his life, that he purportedly did miracles, where he lived, and that he died. We find this in people like Josephus and Tacitus. And then the archaeological record supports the New Testament as a whole. We know where Jesus was born. We know where Jesus died. In fact, we have the ossuary of Caiaphas, one of the high priests who oversaw the condemnation and ultimately led to the trial and death of Jesus. But now we actually have an inscription from Caesarea pointing to Pontius Pilate, who's the Roman governor who oversaw the trial and condemned Jesus to death. In fact, we have the crucified remains of a man named Yehohanan, who was crucified with nails around the time that Jesus lived, showing the biblical account about crucifixion with nails is correct. Friends, a lot of questions can be raised about the New Testament, but when we look at it broadly speaking, the authors claim to be eyewitnesses. We see accurate information they report, and they were willing to die for it. We see many more manuscripts earlier than any other ancient book. And third, the archaeological record supports it. We have good reason to believe that the New Testament is reliable and true.